July 30th, 1975. Bloomfield Township, Michigan. A quiet suburban parking lot sits under the summer sun. Outside a restaurant called the Machu's Red Fox, a man waits. He checks his watch. Again and again. That man is Jimmy Hoffa, one of the most powerful labor figures in American history. A man who controlled millions of dollars and knew secrets that could destroy empires. By the end of that day, he would vanish without a trace. And for the next 30 years, no one inside the American Mafia would dare speak about what really happened. For decades, Hoffa had been more than just a union leader. As president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, he controlled the largest labor union in the United States. But power like that doesn't exist in a vacuum. Behind the scenes, Hoffa had built alliances with organized crime. Not just any crime family. The most powerful families in America. The Genovese crime family, the Gambino crime family, and the Detroit-based network known as the Detroit Partnership. Through pension funds, construction deals, and trucking contracts, millions of dollars flowed between the union and the mob. It was a partnership built on mutual benefit and absolute silence. But by the early 1970s, that silence was beginning to crack. Hoffa had just been released from prison. Convicted in 1967 for jury tampering and fraud, he had served nearly 5 years before being pardoned by President Richard Nixon in 1971. There was one condition. He could not engage in union activity until 1980. For most men, that would have been the end. Not for Hoffa. He wanted his power back, and that made him dangerous. Because by the time he got out, the Mafia had moved on. The Teamsters were now under the influence of men who preferred things quiet, controlled, predictable. Men like Anthony Provenzano, known on the streets as Tony Pro, a Genovese capo with deep connections to the union. A man who had once been Hoffa's ally. Now, something else. The tension between Hoffa and Provenzano had been building for years. It wasn't just business. It was personal. Prison had changed things. Control had shifted, and Hoffa's return threatened to expose everything. The money, the corruption, the deals that were never meant to see daylight. Behind closed doors, meetings began. Quiet conversations between powerful men. In social clubs, in back rooms, in parked cars with engines running. The question wasn't if Hoffa was a problem. The question was, what to do about him. Late July 1975, Hoffa tells his wife he's going to a meeting. A sit-down. He says he's meeting two men, Anthony Provenzano and Anthony Giacalone, known as Tony Jack, a powerful figure in the Detroit Partnership. Both men deny the meeting ever existed, but Hoffa believed it was real and important enough to show up alone. 2:15 p.m. He arrives at the Machu's Red Fox restaurant. Witnesses later say they saw him standing in the parking lot, restless, frustrated, waiting. At 2:30 p.m., he makes a phone call. "I've been here a half hour," he tells his wife. No one showed up. Those would be among the last confirmed words he ever spoke. Minutes later, a car pulls into the lot. No one knows exactly who was inside. No one knows exactly what was said. But witnesses saw Hoffa approach the vehicle. Pause, then get in. The car pulls away and disappears. By nightfall, Hoffa is officially missing. The investigation begins immediately. Local police, then federal agents. Within days, the FBI is fully involved. Because this isn't just a missing person. This is Jimmy Hoffa, and everyone knows this isn't random. Agents begin tracing his last known movements. The phone calls, the witnesses, the restaurant. Every detail matters. But something strange becomes clear almost immediately. No one is talking. Not the restaurant staff. Not the locals. Not the mob-connected figures who should have known something. Nothing. The code of Omerta, the Mafia's rule of silence. It wasn't just being followed. It was being enforced. Behind the scenes, the FBI begins focusing on key suspects. At the top of the list, Anthony Provenzano and Anthony Giacalone. Both men deny any involvement. Both claim they never scheduled a meeting. Both provide alibis. And both remain untouchable. But agents know something else. Hoffa had been making calls. threatening to expose mob influence in the Union, talking about reclaiming control, even hinting at going public. In the mafia world, that's not just dangerous, that's a death sentence. Weeks pass, then months. Search teams comb fields, lakes, and abandoned properties. Tips pour in. Most lead nowhere. Some are clearly false, others too quiet to verify. And then there's the rumors. Whispers in backrooms. Stories told in hushed voices. That Hoffa was killed within hours of getting into that car. That his body was transported across state lines. That it was destroyed, burned, buried, gone forever. But no body is ever found. No weapon, no crime scene, no direct witnesses. Just silence. For the FBI, this becomes one of the most frustrating cases in American history. Because they know what happened. They just can't prove it. Inside organized crime, the message is clear. Even a man as powerful as Jimmy Hoffa can disappear, and the world will never know how. But beneath the silence, the truth still exists, hidden behind layers of loyalty, fear, and time. And somewhere, someone knows exactly what happened in that car. Because this wasn't just a disappearance. It was a decision made by powerful men who believed Hoffa had become too dangerous to live. And as investigators would slowly uncover, the plan to eliminate Jimmy Hoffa didn't begin in that parking lot. It began long before, in conversations no one recorded, in meetings no one admitted to attending, in a world where betrayal is inevitable and silence is survival. The crime nobody dared to talk about had already been set in motion, and the men responsible were still walking free. August 1975, Detroit, Michigan. The headlines are everywhere. Jimmy Hoffa is missing, presumed dead. But inside the world of organized crime, there are no headlines, only silence. Behind that silence, names begin to circulate, not in public, not in courtrooms, but in whispers, among informants, among federal agents, among men who understand how the mafia operates. At the center of it all, one name keeps resurfacing: Anthony Provenzano. Provenzano had motive. He had history. And he had the kind of reputation that made people disappear. For years, he had clashed with Hoffa over control of the Teamsters. Their relationship had deteriorated long before Hoffa went to prison. By the time Hoffa got out, the feud was no longer political. It was personal. Witnesses would later recall violent arguments between the two men. Threats, insults, moments where the tension nearly turned physical. At one point, Provenzano allegedly told Hoffa, "I'll put your head through the wall." It wasn't just talk. In a mafia world, words like that carry weight. But Provenzano wasn't alone, because removing a man like Hoffa required approval, coordination, and trust. Investigators begin looking toward Detroit, toward the Detroit Partnership, a tightly controlled organization, less visible than the New York families, but just as powerful and far more disciplined. At the top, Anthony Giacalone, calm, reserved, strategic, a man who rarely spoke more than necessary, and never made mistakes in public. Giacalone had deep ties to Hoffa, business ties, union ties, financial ties, and according to investigators, he may have been the bridge between New York and Detroit, the man who could coordinate something this sensitive. But again, no one talks. The FBI turns to surveillance. Wiretaps, informants, anything that might break the wall of silence. And slowly, a picture begins to form. Hoffa had been trying to regain control of the Teamsters. But he wasn't just pushing against union leadership. He was pushing against the mafia itself. The pension fund, that was the key. Billions of dollars, loaned to casinos in Las Vegas, used to finance construction projects, controlled quietly by organized crime. If Hoffa came back, that control could be exposed, or worse, taken away. To the mafia, that wasn't a risk they could afford. By late 1975, federal agents begin focusing on another figure, a man not as well known publicly, but deeply connected behind the scenes: Russell Bufalino. Bufalino was one of the most respected bosses in the country. Low profile, highly intelligent, and extremely careful. He wasn't flashy. He didn't seek attention. But when decisions were made at the highest level, he was often involved. Investigators begin to suspect that if a decision was made to eliminate Hoffa, Bufalino would have known or approved it. But again, no proof, only patterns, only connections. Then comes another name, a man who would later become one of the most controversial figures in the entire case. Frank Sheeran, a truck driver, a union official, and according to later claims, a hitman. At the time of Hoffa's disappearance, Sheeran was close to both Hoffa and Bufalino. He moved between worlds, union meetings, mob gatherings, private conversations. He was trusted, and in that world, trust is everything. But in 1975, Sheeran says nothing. The investigation stalls. Months turn into years. And then, a break. Late 1970s, the FBI begins to build cases against organized crime using a new strategy. Not just surveillance, not just informants, but insiders, men who were willing to talk. The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, it changes everything. For the first time, prosecutors can charge entire criminal organizations, not just individuals, not just isolated crimes, but the system itself. And with that pressure, cracks begin to form. Small cracks, carefully hidden, but visible. Informants begin describing how mafia hits are carried out. The structure, the approval process, the planning. Nothing specific to Hoffa, but enough to understand the method. A target is identified. Approval is given. A meeting is arranged. The victim walks in willingly and never walks out. Clean, controlled, silent. Exactly what happened on July 30th, 1975. But there's still no body, no physical evidence, nothing that can hold up in court. And then, a chilling detail emerges. Several informants claim that Hoffa wasn't killed in the parking lot. He was taken somewhere else, a secondary location, prepared in advance. A house, a garage, a place where no one would hear gunshots. The killing itself, quick, professional, and the body, disposed of almost immediately. Some say it was buried. Others say it was incinerated. Even rumors of industrial compactors, steel mills, places where evidence disappears forever. Theories multiply, but the truth remains out of reach. Meanwhile, the suspects continue living their lives. Anthony Provenzano is eventually convicted in an unrelated murder case. He spends the rest of his life in prison, but never speaks about Hoffa. Anthony Giacalone is also convicted on separate charges. He too goes to prison, and he too remains silent. No confessions, no cooperation, no answers. For decades, the case remains open, but frozen. And then, years later, one man begins to talk. Frank Sheeran. In interviews, in conversations, in what would later become public claims. He says he knows exactly what happened. He says he was there. And according to him, the crime nobody dared to talk about was far more personal than anyone imagined. Because the man who pulled the trigger was someone Hoffa trusted, someone he never saw coming. And if Sheeran was telling the truth, then the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa was not just a mob hit, it was a betrayal. Early 2000s, United States. The Hoffa case is still open, still unsolved, still haunting the FBI. Nearly 3 decades have passed. Witnesses are aging. Suspects are dying. Evidence is fading. But one thing hasn't changed. No body. And then, a confession. Frank Sheeran begins telling his story, quietly at first, then in recorded interviews, and eventually, in detail. According to Sheeran, he wasn't just connected to the case. He was central to it. He claims the decision to kill Hoffa came from the highest levels of organized crime. Approved, sanctioned, final. And the reasoning? Simple. Hoffa wouldn't stop. He kept pushing, kept talking, kept trying to reclaim power that no longer belonged to him. In that world, that makes you a liability. Sheeran says he was asked to help set up the meeting, to reassure Hoffa, to make sure he showed up. Because Hoffa trusted him. July 30th, 1975. The Machu's Red Fox parking lot. Sheeran claims he was there. That Hoffa got into the car without hesitation. because he believed he was among friends. From there, they drove to a house in Detroit, a quiet neighborhood. No witnesses, no attention. Inside, everything was already decided. Sheeran says Hoffa realized it. Too late. No long conversation. No dramatic confrontation. Just a moment. A pause. And then, 2 shots. Quick. Controlled. Final. According to Sheeran, Hoffa never saw it coming. The body was removed immediately. Disposed of within hours. No grave. No marker. No trace. Gone. For investigators, the story is compelling. It fits the timeline. It fits the method. It fits everything they know about how organized crime operates. But there's a problem. No physical evidence. No forensic confirmation. No witnesses to support the claim. No remains. In a case like this, that matters. The FBI investigates Sheeran's account, re-examines old leads, searches locations tied to his story. Nothing. The house he described shows no evidence. The alleged disposal sites yield nothing conclusive. The case remains legally unsolved. And yet, within law enforcement circles, many believe Sheeran told at least part of the truth, because his version explains something no other theory does. The absolute silence. For decades, no one inside the mafia talked about Hoffa, not under pressure, not in prison, not even when facing life sentences. That level of silence doesn't happen unless everyone understands the stakes. This wasn't just a hit. It was a message. Even a man as powerful as Jimmy Hoffa could be erased, and no one would ever answer for it. As the years pass, the key figures disappear. Anthony Provenzano dies in prison in 1988, still silent, still denying everything. Anthony Giacalone dies in 2001, never charged in connection to Hoffa, never cooperating. Russell Bufalino dies in 1994, taking whatever he knew to the grave. And Frank Sheeran himself dies in 2003, leaving behind a confession, but no proof. The FBI continues to receive tips, even decades later. In 2013, agents search a property in Michigan, acting on a new lead. Again, nothing. Concrete is dug up. Soil is tested. Time is spent. But Hoffa remains missing. Over the years, theories evolve. Buried beneath a stadium, hidden in a landfill, disposed of in a crematorium. Each theory captures attention, but none deliver answers. Because the truth was never meant to be found. Inside organized crime, the rules are simple. Loyalty above all, silence at any cost. And when those rules are broken, the consequences are permanent. Hoffa broke those rules. He challenged the system. He threatened exposure. He tried to take back control. And for that, he disappeared. No funeral, no justice, no closure, just a parking lot, a waiting man, and a car that drove away. The crime nobody dared to talk about for 30 years was never just about murder. It was about power. Who holds it? Who protects it? And what happens to anyone who tries to take it back? Today, the name Jimmy Hoffa still echoes through American history, not just as a labor leader, but as a warning. Because in the world he was part of, there are no loose ends, only silence. And sometimes that silence lasts forever.